For 18 years, she hid her SEAL tattoos beneath long sleeves and cardigans. Her neighbors knew her only as the quiet librarian who taught first aid on weekends. No one questioned why she swam 2 miles every morning before dawn, or why her eyes constantly scanned rooms for exits. Then they came for her, not to expose her secret, but because they needed it. The impossible mission. The children who would die without her skills. The enemy who once left her for dead. Some ghosts never truly disappear. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, please consider subscribing to join our community of storytellers and listeners. The morning sun filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished oak floors of Harborview Public Library. Audrienne Frost moved methodically between the shelves, her fingers tracing the spines of returned books as she returned each one to its precise location. Reference materials on the top shelf, alphabetized by author, then subject. Fiction below, arranged by genre, then author. Everything in its proper place. Her movements were efficient, purposeful. Nothing wasted. Years of training had ingrained economy of motion so deeply that it had become second nature, even here, among the dusty volumes and quiet corners. "Miss Frost," a small voice called from the end of the aisle, "can you help me find a book about dinosaurs?" Audrienne's expression softened as she turned to face 7-year-old Elijah Patterson, a library regular whose enthusiasm for prehistoric creatures was boundless. It was one of the few times her carefully composed mask slipped, revealing a gentleness few in town ever witnessed. "Of course," she replied, guiding him toward the children's section. "I believe we just received a new book about recent fossil discoveries in Argentina." As they walked, Audrienne unconsciously tugged at her cardigan sleeve, ensuring it covered her forearm completely despite the summer heat that had settled over the coastal town. The air conditioning in the library had been temperamental all week, but she never removed the light sweater, not even when beads of sweat formed at her temples. From the circulation desk, Mrs. Winters, the head librarian, watched with curious eyes. In the 5 years since Audrienne had arrived in Harborview, she had proven herself an invaluable employee, punctual, efficient, knowledgeable. Yet, there remained something inscrutable about her, a distance she maintained with unfailing politeness. "Like trying to befriend a ghost," Mrs. Winters had once commented to her husband. Pleasant enough, but somehow never fully present. After helping Elijah, Audrienne returned to the main desk where a stack of new acquisitions awaited processing. She worked steadily, her movements precise as she attached barcodes and protective covers. Outside, summer tourists strolled along the town's scenic waterfront, enjoying ice cream cones and the views of sailboats dotting the harbor. Inside, time seemed to move differently, marked only by the soft ticking of the ancient grandfather clock in the reading room. At 4:30 p.m., Audrienne's shift ended. She gathered her modest belongings, a plain canvas tote, a stainless steel water bottle, a small notebook where she jotted daily observations, and nodded goodbye to her colleagues. The walk home took exactly 12 minutes, following the same route she always took, with the same vigilant awareness of her surroundings that had kept her alive in far more dangerous environments. Her cottage sat on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a garden of native plants requiring minimal maintenance. Inside, the space was spartanly furnished but not uncomfortable, functional, like everything else in her carefully constructed life. Audrienne changed into athletic wear, still long-sleeved despite the heat, and prepared a simple meal of grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, and quinoa. She ate at her small kitchen table, facing the door, back to the wall, a habit she had never broken. The plates were rinsed and placed in the dishwasher by 6:15 p.m., allowing time for her evening routine. 30 minutes of targeted strength exercises, followed by stretching, then an hour of reading current events. The television rarely came on except for specific news programs, but tonight something caught her attention during the international segment, a hostage situation at an embassy in Kyrgyzstan, 3 children of diplomatic personnel held by an extremist group demanding the release of political prisoners. Audrienne leaned forward, her body tensing as the camera panned across the embassy compound, now surrounded by local military and international security forces. For a brief moment, the footage showed one of the captors, his face partially obscured, but his neck visible. There, just below his jawline, a distinctive tattoo, a geometric pattern surrounding a curved dagger. Her breath caught. She reached for the remote, rewinding and freezing the frame, studying the image with an intensity that would have startled anyone who knew only the quiet librarian of Harborview. After a long moment, Audrienne moved to a specific floorboard in the hallway. With practiced movements, she pried it loose, revealing a small compartment containing a burner phone. She replaced every 6 months, whether it had been used or not. Muscle memory guided her fingers as she dialed a number she had never written down, but had committed to memory years ago. The line connected. She spoke only 3 words. "It's Thornfield," then immediately ended the call and disassembled the phone, removing the battery and SIM card. That night, sleep came in fitful bursts. Old nightmares resurfaced, the smell of cordite, the weight of a comrade's body as life drained away, the sound of a particular laugh that had haunted her for 18 years. By 4:30 a.m., she abandoned the pretense of rest and dressed for her morning swim. The beach was deserted at this hour, the town still wrapped in pre-dawn darkness. Audrienne entered the water without hesitation, its cold embrace both punishment and comfort as she began her daily 2-mile route parallel to the shoreline. The physical exertion quieted her mind, allowing her to focus only on the rhythm of her strokes, the control of her breathing, the burn in her muscles. By the time she returned to shore, the first hints of sunrise colored the horizon. She dried quickly, pulled her long-sleeved shirt over her still damp skin, and walked back to her cottage, where she showered and dressed for work in her usual attire, khaki pants, button-down shirt, and the ever-present cardigan. At the library, the morning unfolded with its familiar pattern. Story time for preschoolers at 10 a.m., reference assistance for a high school student researching local history at 11:30, lunch alone in the staff room at 12:15. It was during the afternoon lull that the disruption came. A dark SUV with government plates pulled into the library parking lot. 2 figures emerged, a man in his 50s with closely cropped silver hair and the weathered complexion of someone who had spent years in harsh conditions, and a younger woman with intense eyes and the unmistakable bearing of military personnel, despite their civilian clothes. They entered the library casually, like any other patrons, but Audrienne recognized the controlled alertness in their movements, the way they instinctively assessed the space and its occupants. She continued assisting an elderly woman with selecting large print novels, but her awareness had shifted, her senses heightened in a way they hadn't been in years. When the elderly patron finally moved away with her selections, the man approached the desk. "Excuse me," he said, voice low and controlled. "I'm looking for materials on naval history." Audrienne's posture shifted subtly, spine straightening, shoulders squaring, eyes hardening. The change was nearly imperceptible, but to trained observers like her visitors, it spoke volumes. "The biography section is in the West Wing," she replied neutrally, leading them toward a secluded corner of the library where their conversation wouldn't be overheard. Once alone among the shelves, the man spoke first. "Commander Frost." It wasn't a question, and Audrienne didn't acknowledge the rank she officially never held. Instead, she turned to face them fully, her expression carefully neutral. "Captain Thorne, it's been a long time. 18 years, 2 months, he confirmed. You look well." The woman beside him remained silent, her skepticism evident in the slight furrow of her brow and the tension in her jaw. "This is Lieutenant Siobhan Kerrigan," Thorne introduced. "Special Activities Division." Audrienne nodded once in acknowledgement, but offered no pleasantries. "Why are you here?" "Thornfield is active again," Thorne whispered, his voice barely audible. 3 diplomatic children taken from the international school in Bishkek, same signature as before. "With all due respect, sir," Kerrigan interjected, unable to contain herself any longer. "We need operators, not librarians." Her eyes flicked dismissively over Audrienne's cardigan and sensible shoes. Audrienne simply stared at her, saying nothing, but something in her gaze made the younger woman shift uncomfortably. "You saw the news?" Thorne continued, ignoring the interruption. "The tattoo. You recognized it." "Yes." "We need you back." Audrienne turned away, running her finger along the spine of a biography of Admiral Chester Nimitz. "I'm retired, Captain. Permanently. Not according to your file. My file doesn't exist." Thorne leaned closer. Those children have less than 72 hours. After that, if pattern holds, we'll be recovering bodies. Audrienne closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had changed. A hardness, a focus that belonged to a different woman than the one who had organized community book drives and taught seniors how to use the library's computer system. "I'll need to see the intelligence reports," she said finally. "All of them, and surveillance footage of the compound." Thorne nodded. "There's a briefing packet in the car. I'll review it tonight," she said, then glanced at her watch. "I finish here at 4:30. "We don't have time for," Kerrigan began, but Audrienne cut her off with a look that would have silenced far more seasoned operators. "I've maintained this cover for 18 years, Lieutenant. I won't compromise it in front of the Tuesday afternoon book club, 4:30. That evening, after reviewing the briefing materials in her cottage, Audrienne unlocked the hidden compartment beneath her floorboards once more. Inside the weathered metal box lay a worn compass with unusual markings. Not a navigational tool, but a recognition signal, and a faded photograph of 6 soldiers, their faces obscured by shadow, except for one. The image showed a younger Audrienne in full combat gear, her expression serious, but her eyes alive in a way they hadn't been in years. She traced the outline of the other figures with her fingertip. Names she never spoke aloud anymore. Faces she saw every night in her dreams. The next morning, for the first time in 5 years, Audrienne Frost didn't arrive for her shift at the Harborview Public Library. By noon, Wesley Hargrove, the pompous head of the library board, was complaining loudly about her irresponsibility during the monthly meeting. Probably couldn't handle the pressure of real work, he speculated to the other board members, unaware that at that very moment, Audrienne was being transported to a classified facility where decisions would be made that could save lives or end them, including, quite possibly, her own. The military transport plane descended through heavy cloud cover, its engines rumbling as it approached the remote airfield. Inside, Audrienne sat alone, separated from the other, passengers by both physical space and the weight of what was to come. She had changed from her librarian attire into standard-issue tactical pants and a long-sleeve performance shirt, but still looked nothing like the hardened operators seated across the cabin. Captain Thorne had remained mostly silent during the flight, reviewing documents and occasionally speaking in hushed tones with Lieutenant Kerrigan. Whatever doubts the younger woman harbored about Audrienne's capabilities, she kept them to herself now, though her sideways glances spoke volumes. When they landed, a convoy of unmarked vehicles transported them to a nondescript building surrounded by security measures that would be invisible to untrained eyes. Audrienne noted them all automatically, motion sensors disguised as landscape lighting, concealed camera positions, the subtle patterns of guard rotations. Inside, they were led to a conference room where several high-ranking officers waited. At the head of the table sat Admiral Cassian Vega, his silver hair cropped close to his scalp, his posture rigid even while seated. He didn't rise when they entered, his eyes tracking Audrienne with undisguised skepticism. "This is who you bring me, Thorne?" Vega asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to unquestioned obedience. "A civilian who hasn't seen action in nearly 2 decades?" Thorne placed a file folder on the table. The cover bore a single word in red, classified, followed by Operation Thornfield. "With respect, Admiral, she's never been a civilian." He opened the folder and began laying out photographs, satellite imagery, and intelligence reports. 18 years ago, we sent a covert unit to eliminate a terrorist cell led by Mikhail Thornfield. The mission was compromised. 5 operators killed. Kerrigan leaned forward, studying the images with growing confusion. "Sir, I've studied every SEAL operation from that period. There's no record of this mission or this target." "Because officially, it never happened," Thorne replied, then turned to Audrienne. "And officially, Commander Audrienne Frost never existed. The first woman to complete SEAL training was never acknowledged. Her record was erased to protect both her and the program." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Audrienne, who stood perfectly still, her expression revealing nothing. "That's impossible," Kerrigan said finally. "There's never been a female SEAL. The standards were met," Thorne interrupted. "Exceeded, actually. Her scores in advanced tactical training remain unbroken." Admiral Vega's eyes narrowed. "If what you're saying is true, Thorne, then why are we only hearing about this now? Why bring her in after all this time?" Because of what happened after the mission was compromised, Thorne continued, Commander Frost was the only survivor. Despite sustaining multiple gunshot wounds, she completed the mission objectives and extracted 3 hostages before evac arrived. Audrey-Anne, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, finally moved. Without ceremony, she removed her long-sleeve shirt, revealing a tight-fitting tank top underneath. Her arms and upper back were covered with intricate SEAL tattoos, the designs partially obscured by extensive scarring that told its own story of past violence. One of the junior officers audibly inhaled. Another looked away, uncomfortable with the visible evidence of what she had endured. Admiral Vega stood slowly, his earlier skepticism giving way to a grudging respect. I opposed your recruitment then, he admitted. I was wrong. We need you now, Commander. Audrey-Anne finally spoke, her voice carrying the weight of experience no one else in the room possessed. Thornfield left me for dead once. He won't make that mistake again. Over the next 48 hours, Audrey-Anne underwent an accelerated reintegration process. Medical evaluations confirmed that despite her age and years away from service, she maintained exceptional physical condition. Psychological assessments raised eyebrows among the staff psychologists, who noted her compartmentalization abilities exceeded anything in their reference materials. At the firing range, her initial shots showed the rust of disuse, but by the 3rd magazine, she was grouping tightly at distances that challenged even current operators. In the tactical simulator, she processed threat assessments with a speed that the computer almost couldn't track. Lieutenant Kerrigan observed these sessions with increasing amazement. During a brief break, she approached Audrey-Anne, who was methodically field stripping and reassembling a sidearm. How did you maintain this level of readiness while working at a library? She asked. Audrey-Anne's hands never stopped moving. I never stopped training, just changed the venue. But the equipment, the facilities, you don't need a firing range to maintain trigger discipline. You don't need a tactical course to practice situational awareness. She reassembled the weapon with a final click. Every skill that matters can be practiced anywhere, if you're disciplined enough. Kerrigan considered this. The other operators from your unit, what were they like? For the first time, Audrey-Anne paused, her fingers going still on the weapon. The best I've ever known. Brave, loyal. After a moment, she added more softly, family. The following morning, Audrey-Anne joined a select team of current SEAL operators for specialized training exercises. Initial tension gave way to cautious respect, as she demonstrated techniques for silent infiltration that weren't in any current manual. By afternoon, even the most skeptical team members were asking questions, recognizing the value of her experience. At the mission briefing that evening, Thorne presented the latest intelligence on the hostage situation. Satellite imagery showed a compound in the mountains of Kyrgyzstan, heavily guarded and nearly inaccessible by conventional means. 3 children, he reminded them, pointing to photographs of the young hostages, ages 7, 9, and 12, children of diplomatic personnel from 3 different nations, taken 4 days ago during what should have been a routine transfer from their school to a secure facility. He changed the display to show a man in his 50s, his face hardened by years of violence. Mikhail Thornfield, former Spetsnaz, went rogue after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, built a network of mercenaries and extremists, officially killed in a drone strike 5 years ago, but evidently reports of his death were greatly exaggerated. Audrey-Anne studied the image, noting the changes time had wrought on a face she had never forgotten. The tattoo on his neck. It's new. Thorne nodded. Added sometime in the last decade. Intelligence suggests it's connected to a splinter ideology he's developed, combining elements of various extremist doctrines. What are his demands? Asked one of the team leaders. That's the problem, Thorne replied. He hasn't made any. A murmur ran through the assembled operators. Hostage takers always had demands. Audrey-Anne spoke into the uncertain silence. He doesn't want anything that can be given. This isn't about ideology or money. It's personal, revenge against the countries whose joint task force allegedly killed him. How can you be sure? Kerrigan asked. Because I know him, Audrey-Anne replied. I studied him for months before our original mission. He lost his brother in a joint counterterrorism operation. Everything since then has been about retribution. The room absorbed this information, the implications clear. If Adrienne was right, negotiation was pointless. The children were taken to be executed, their deaths designed to send a message. Timeline? One of the team leaders asked. Based on previous patterns, we have less than 24 hours before he begins executing hostages. Thorne answered grimly. The extraction plan is high risk. We'll insert by halo jump at 0200 hours, using the mountain ridge for cover. Primary assault team will create a diversion at the south entrance while the extraction team enters through the north. Our intelligence suggests the children are being held in the central building, second floor. As Thorne continued outlining the details, Adrienne studied the compound schematics, her mind already identifying potential failure points and contingencies. When he finished, she pointed to a section of the blueprint. This service tunnel isn't on your entry plan, she noted. Thorne shook his head. Too narrow for tactical movement with gear. We considered it, but I can fit, Adrienne interrupted, and it provides direct access to the likely holding area. Absolutely not, Kerrigan objected. No one goes in alone, especially not someone who hasn't seen combat in 18 years, Adrienne finished for her. I understand the concern, Lieutenant, but this tunnel represents our best chance of reaching the children before Thornfield realizes the compound is under attack. The room fell silent as Thorne considered the proposal. Finally, he nodded. We'll adjust the plan. Commander Frost will lead a two-person team through the service tunnel, while the main assault proceeds as outlined. As the briefing concluded, one of the younger operators approached Adrienne. With respect, ma'am, how can we be sure of your commitment after so many years away? This isn't like training exercises. Real lives are at stake. Several others tensed, expecting Adrienne to take offense. Instead, she regarded the young man calmly. I left the SEALS, she said simply. I never left the oath. In the pre-mission hours, Adrienne prepared with the methodical precision that had defined her former life. She checked and rechecked her equipment, visualized entry points and contingencies, and studied the latest intelligence reports for any changes or updates. In the ready room, she caught her reflection in a polished surface, her hair now pulled back in a tight tactical bun, her face devoid of the soft expressions she had cultivated in Harborview. The woman looking back at her was neither the librarian nor entirely the SEAL commander she had once been, but something new forged from the elements of both. Kerrigan appeared beside her, already dressed in tactical gear. Final briefing in 10 minutes, she said, then hesitated before adding, You were assigned to my team. For the tunnel insertion. Adrienne nodded once. I know. I still have concerns about this plan. Noted. Kerrigan's professional demeanor cracked slightly. Look, I don't doubt your experience or your abilities. What you did 18 years ago was extraordinary. But people change, priorities shift. If there's even a moment of hesitation when we're in there won't be, Adrienne interrupted. She turned to face the younger woman fully. Lieutenant, I've spent 18 years living a life I built to atone for the fact that I survived when my team didn't. Every morning swim, every book shelved, every first aid class taught, they were all part of a penance I assigned myself. But not one day passed when I forgot who I really am. Kerrigan studied her face, seeming to truly see her for the first time. And who is that exactly? Adrienne checked her weapon one final time before securing it. I guess we're both about to find out. The night air bit with mountain chill as the team prepared for insertion. Adrienne adjusted her oxygen mask and checked her altimeter one final time. Beside her, Kerrigan performed her own equipment check with practiced efficiency. The aircraft's red interior lights cast everything in a bloody glow, transforming familiar faces into ominous shadows. 60 seconds to drop zone, the jumpmaster announced over the comm system. Captain Thorne approached, his expression grave even in the dim light. Mission parameters unchanged. Extraction team enters through. The service tunnel. Assault team creates diversion at south entrance. Primary objective remains the retrieval of all 3 hostages. Secondary objective, if opportunity presents, is the neutralization of Thornfield. His eyes lingered on Adrienne. Stick to the plan, Commander. She nodded once, recognizing the unspoken warning. Don't make this personal. 30 seconds. The team lined up at the jump door, their movements synchronized by years of training. As second in the insertion order, Audrienne positioned herself behind the lead jumper, her muscle memory flawlessly recalling procedures she hadn't performed in nearly 2 decades. Green light, go, go, go! One by one, they dropped into the darkness, their black tactical gear rendering them nearly invisible against the night sky. Audrienne felt the familiar rush of freefall, the wind tearing at her face mask as the altimeter numbers dropped rapidly. At precisely the right altitude, she deployed her chute, feeling the expected jolt as it caught the air and slowed her descent. The landing zone appeared below, a small clearing in the dense forest covering the mountain's western slope, approximately 3 kilometers from the target compound. Audrienne adjusted her approach, compensating for unexpected wind currents with instinctive corrections. Her boots touched down almost silently, and within seconds she collected her chute and moved to the designated rally point. The team regrouped quickly, confirming all members had landed successfully. Under Thorne's direction, they divided into their assigned units, the main assault team heading south, while Audrienne, Kerrigan, and a communication specialist named Ramirez moved toward the service tunnel entrance on the eastern perimeter. Their approach took them through dense undergrowth and across a dry stream bed, every movement calculated for maximum stealth. When they reached the tunnel entrance, they found it partially collapsed, its opening narrower than the intelligence reports had indicated. "This is a problem," Kerrigan whispered, eyeing the constricted space. "We can't fit through with our full tactical gear." Audrienne was already removing her bulkier equipment, stripping down to the essentials: sidearm, knife, compact medical kit, and a small explosive charge. "We adapt," she said simply. Kerrigan hesitated, then followed her example, while Ramirez established a communications relay at the tunnel entrance. "I'll maintain contact from here," he said, setting up his equipment. "Once you're inside, these stone walls will block most transmissions until you reach the main structure." Audrienne nodded her understanding. "The assault team moves in 20 minutes. We need to be in position by then." She turned to the tunnel entrance, took a deep breath, and began to crawl forward into the darkness. The passage was tight enough that her shoulders scraped against the rough stone walls, sending small cascades of dirt and pebbles down her neck. Behind her, Kerrigan followed, her breathing controlled but audibly tense in the confined space. For 10 agonizing minutes, they inched forward through the narrowing tunnel. At several points, Audrienne had to exhale completely to squeeze through particularly tight sections. Just as the air was growing stale and the weight of the mountain above seemed most oppressive, the tunnel widened slightly and angled upward. "Almost there," Audrienne whispered. Blueprints showed this connecting to a maintenance closet on the ground floor. She reached the end of the tunnel, where metal grating blocked further progress. Through the slats, she could see a dimly lit storage space filled with cleaning supplies and maintenance equipment. More importantly, she could hear voices speaking in rapid Kyrgyz, just beyond what appeared to be a closed door. With painstaking care, Audrienne removed the grating and slipped into the closet, immediately pressing herself against the wall beside the door. Kerrigan followed, taking position on the opposite side. "Comm check," Kerrigan breathed into her radio. After a moment of static, Ramirez's voice came through, faint but audible. "Copy. Assault team is in final position. T-minus 7 minutes." Audrienne put her ear to the door, listening as the voices outside grew louder, then began to fade. Once silence returned, she eased the door open a fraction, peering into a poorly lit corridor. "Clear," she whispered, and they slipped out of the closet. According to the compound schematics, the hostages were likely being held in a room on the second floor, accessible via a stairwell at the end of the corridor. Moving in tandem, Audrienne and Kerrigan advanced, their footfalls silent on the concrete floor. They had nearly reached the stairwell when a door opened unexpectedly and a guard stepped into the hallway. For a split second, all 3 figures froze in mutual surprise. Then training took over. Audrienne moved first, closing the distance before the guard could raise his weapon. Her hand clamped over his mouth while her other arm locked around his throat in a precise hold. Within seconds, he slumped unconscious, and they dragged him into a nearby room. "That complicates things," Kerrigan muttered. "He'll be missed soon." "Then we move faster," Audrienne replied, already heading for the stairs. The second floor was more heavily guarded, with 2 armed men stationed at the far end of the hallway. Using hand signals, Audrienne indicated they would time their approach with the beginning of the assault team's diversion. Right on schedule, the sound of an explosion rocked the compound from the south side. The guards immediately turned toward the commotion, speaking urgently into their radios. In that moment of distraction, Audrienne and Kerrigan struck simultaneously, neutralizing both men with silent efficiency. "Command, this is Frost," Audrienne whispered into her comm. "Second floor secured, proceeding to target room." Through the static, Thorne's voice came through. "Copy. Assault team engaged. Heavy resistance at south entrance. Proceed with extraction." The door to the suspected hostage room was locked, but Kerrigan made quick work of it with a compact breaching tool. Inside, they found what they were looking for. 3 children huddled together on a single cot, their eyes wide with fear. "We're Americans," Audrienne said softly, holstering her weapon and showing her empty hands. "We're here to take you home." The oldest child, a girl of about 12, positioned herself protectively in front of the younger ones. "How do we know you're really here to help?" Audrienne knelt to the child's eye level. "My name is Commander Frost. I was sent by your parents. Your father works at the French embassy. He has a photograph of you on his desk where you're holding your cat, Minou." The girl's shoulders relaxed slightly, but her eyes remained wary. "They said if anyone came for us, they would kill us all." "That's not going to happen," Audrienne promised. "We're leaving now, but you need to do exactly as we say." "Can you do that?" All 3 children nodded, and Kerrigan quickly checked them for injuries while Audrienne secured the hallway. Their extraction route would take them back down the service tunnel, uncomfortable but safer than trying to fight their way out through the main compound, which was now erupting with gunfire as the assault team engaged Thornfield's forces. "Command, we have the packages," Kerrigan reported, moving to extraction point. "Copy that," Thorne responded. "Be advised, we have confirmation that Thornfield is on site. Repeat, primary target is confirmed on location." Audrienne's body tensed at the news, but her expression remained calm as she guided the children toward the stairwell. "Stay close," she instructed them. "Lieutenant Kerrigan will lead. I'll cover our rear." They had just reached the bottom of the stairs when the building's power cut out, plunging the corridor into darkness. Emergency lighting activated seconds later, casting everything in an eerie red glow similar to the aircraft before the jump. "They're cutting power to control movement," Audrienne observed. "Standard protocol when a compound is compromised." Kerrigan nodded grimly. "Which means they'll be sweeping every sector systematically." They increased their pace, hurrying the children toward the maintenance closet and the tunnel beyond. Just as they reached it, gunfire erupted from the adjacent corridor, and Kerrigan pushed the children into the closet as Audrienne returned fire, providing cover. "Get them through the tunnel," Audrienne ordered. "I'll hold this position." "That's not the plan," Kerrigan objected, even as she helped the first child into the tunnel entrance. "Plans change. Go." Kerrigan hesitated, then made her decision. "I'll get them to the extraction point, then come back with reinforcements." Audrienne knew it was a promise that couldn't be kept. The timeline was too tight, the situation too volatile, but she nodded anyway. "Go." As Kerrigan disappeared into the tunnel with the children, Audrienne took a defensive position at the corridor junction, her mind calculating ammunition, angles, and time. She needed to buy at least 15 minutes for the tunnel extraction to succeed. The radio crackled with increasing static as the assault team reported heavy resistance. "Frost, what's your status?" Thorne demanded. "Packages are moving to extraction with Kerrigan," she replied. "I'm maintaining position to cover their retreat." Before Thorne could respond, a new voice cut through the chaos, calm, measured, and speaking in accented English. "All teams, be advised that the facility's self-destruct protocol has been activated. You have 10 minutes to clear the compound." Audrienne recognized the voice immediately. Thornfield. She made her decision in that moment. Instead of retreating toward the tunnel, she advanced deeper into the compound, moving with the instinctive stealth that had once made her legendary among her peers. The sound of fighting guided her toward the central command room, where she suspected Thornfield would be orchestrating the defense of his facility. She was right. Through a partially open door, she spotted him. Older, more scarred, but unmistakably the same man who had left her for dead 18 years earlier. He stood before a bank of monitors, directing his remaining forces with the calculated precision of a chess master. Audrienne could have taken the shot then. Clean, simple, final, but something deeper than vengeance drove her forward. She wanted him to see her face, to know who had come for him after all these years. She entered the room silently, her weapon trained on his heart. Thornfield. He turned, his expression registering first surprise, then a slow, terrible recognition. "You're supposed to be dead," he said, his voice betraying genuine shock. "So are you," she replied calmly, her aim never wavering. His eyes narrowed as he studied her face. The American woman, the one who refused to die. He gave a small, appreciative nod. "I should have confirmed the kill personally. A mistake you won't get to repeat." Thornfield smiled, revealing teeth too perfect to be original. "Perhaps? But neither of us is leaving this place alive. The destruction sequence cannot be aborted." "I'm not here to leave," Audrienne said. "I'm here to finish what I started 18 years ago." His hand moved suddenly toward a console, but Audrienne was faster. Her shot struck him in the shoulder, spinning him away from the controls. Thornfield stumbled but didn't fall, drawing his own weapon with his uninjured arm. What followed was a brutal exchange of gunfire and hand-to-hand combat as they fought through the command center. Despite his age, Thornfield remained a formidable opponent, his movements revealing his Spetsnaz training. But Audrienne had evolved beyond her original conditioning, incorporating techniques from a dozen disciplines during her years in exile. As the facility's warning system counted down the final minutes before detonation, Audrienne gained the upper hand, disarming Thornfield and driving him to his knees. "The children are already safe," she told him, her weapon aimed at his forehead. "Your revenge has failed." For the first time, genuine emotion crossed his face, not fear, but a deep, consuming rage. "There will be others," he spat. "The cause continues beyond any individual." "Not your cause," Audrienne replied. "Not anymore." Her comm unit suddenly crackled to life, Thorn's voice urgent through the static. "Frost, report. The children are secure. Extraction team is clear. What is your position?" She hesitated, finger on the trigger, 18 years of nightmares crystallized into this single moment of decision. "Commander Frost, acknowledge. The facility is going critical." Audrienne made her choice. Instead of taking the shot, she struck Thornfield with the butt of her weapon, rendering him unconscious. Then she zip-tied his hands and activated the locator beacon on his body. "Command, this is Frost. Primary target is subdued and tagged for intelligence retrieval, moving to extraction point now." She ran then, following the emergency exit routes she had memorized from the compound schematics. Behind her, the first series of explosions began to tear through the facility's lower levels, sending tremors through the floors and walls. Audrienne had nearly reached the northern perimeter when the main charge detonated. The blast wave caught her at the threshold of an exterior door, hurling her through the opening and into the night beyond. Her world became fire and noise, then darkness. When consciousness returned, Audrienne found herself being loaded onto a medical transport, oxygen mask covering her face, medics working frantically around her. "We've got her! She's alive!" someone shouted over the roar of helicopter rotors. Through blurred vision, she saw Kerrigan leaning over her, face streaked with dirt and concern. "The children?" Audrienne managed to ask, her voice barely audible. "Safe," Kerrigan assured her. "All three unharmed. You did it, Commander." "Thornfield?" Kerrigan's expression tightened. The intelligence team couldn't reach him before the secondary explosions. "He's gone." Audrienne closed her eyes, uncertain whether what she felt was relief or regret. Perhaps both. "The mission is complete," Kerrigan added softly. "You can stand down now." As the helicopter lifted off, carrying her away from the burning remains of the compound, Audrienne realized that for the first time in 18 years, she might actually be able to do just that. 3 months later, a solemn ceremony took place at the Harborview Public Library. The community room had been prepared with care. Fresh flowers adorned the podium, and rows of chairs faced a display that had been draped with a cloth cover. Wesley Hargrove nervously adjusted his tie as he addressed the assembled crowd, which included several uniformed military officers seated in the front row. "We gather today to rename our community room in honor of Audrienne Frost," he began, his usual pomposity subdued by genuine remorse. "A woman who, as we recently learned, served our country with extraordinary distinction." He gestured to Captain Thorne, who approached the podium with measured steps. "Thank you, Mr. Hargrove. It is my privilege today to present this memorial to your library and your community. Thorne removed the cloth covering, revealing a shadow box containing several medals, including the Navy Cross, mounted beside a photograph of Audrienne in her librarian attire, helping a child with a book. Commander Frost never sought recognition, Thorne continued. She believed the greatest service is often invisible. For nearly 2 decades, she lived among you not as a decorated war hero, but as a dedicated librarian who taught your children, assisted your seniors, and enriched your community in countless quiet ways. From the back of the room, a figure watched the proceedings. Audrienne herself, her hair now cut short, new scars partially visible above her collar. She wore the compass from her hidden box around her neck, its unusual markings catching the light when she moved. As the ceremony concluded, she slipped away unnoticed by most, though Thorne's eyes met hers briefly in silent acknowledgement. Outside, Lieutenant Kerrigan waited beside a government vehicle. "Everything all right?" Kerrigan asked as Audrienne approached. "Yes," she replied, surprising herself with how true it felt. "Just saying goodbye." Later that night, Audrienne returned to her cottage for the last time. Most of her few possessions had already been packed or donated. All that remained was to collect the final items she had left behind. On the kitchen counter, she found a package that hadn't been there earlier. Inside was a set of new identity documents and a handwritten note. "Some ghosts never rest. When you're ready." T. Audrienne smiled faintly, tucking the documents into her pocket. She took one last look around the space that had been her sanctuary and her prison for so many years, then closed the door behind her without looking back. The following morning, just before dawn, a solitary figure entered the water at Harborview's beach. Audrienne swam with powerful strokes, her tattoos fully visible in the growing light, no longer hidden beneath long sleeves and carefully constructed lies. She had no idea what would come next, whether she would accept Thorne's implicit offer to return to service or forge a new path entirely. For now, it was enough to simply move through the water, feeling the rhythm of her breath and the strength in her muscles. For the first time in 18 years, Audrienne Frost was no longer hiding.